that should all be working for you. So it's recording, and then I'll just admit people in when they come in, and if you've started, I'll just nip up and admit them so you don't have to start.
Okay, and then I assume it's just
Clicker, yeah.
to forward, backwards.
Yeah, and then that's the light.
It's the mic. And you want us to work on the mic?
Yeah, if you'd like to, just push it up and then start. It's just another. And then they'll see you like here, so you can move it around if you want.
Do they need to, I suppose they need to be able to see that?
They'll see that.
Of course, because it's, yeah, fair enough.
I'll just wait till that.
All right, I'll see the back and say.
I might just keep it to that because I know that.
Don't look at it.
I know, I was slightly worried about it. You can sit wherever you want, whenever you want. You're a bit early, I suppose. It's only 10:56. I can talk to myself. Someone said. Oh, because you're having to see it on there, but do it on there. Yeah. It's more than I expected. You're here tomorrow as well. Could go. Slow, it should be 30 minutes. A little bit shorter, I suppose. Because I just don't get nervous to speak too fast. It's just one thing. You're right. Yeah, absolutely fine. Yeah, no worries. So just push it up. Yeah. Good morning. It's working, which is good. And thank you for coming to listen. My name is Georgina, and I'm the Deputy Curator of Philately at the Postal Museum, and also our curator behind our new exhibition, Wish You Were Here, 151 years of the British postcard. And I think it's hard to kind of deny that postcard sending and collecting has slightly declined. But what I've learned from this exhibition is how interesting the postcard has been used through history and how it has adapted to the needs of its audience. So today I'd like to look at kind of how the postcard came about and also the changes in the use of the postcard that we see up until the present day. So the very first postcard was issued in Austria-Hungary back in 1869. It was an idea by Dr. Emanuel Hermann, though he wasn't the first person to make this suggestion. The cards were issued in 2 languages, German and Hungarian, and were pretty popular. The first time the postcard was suggested in Britain was in the same year in an article in the Scotsman, where it was discussed how you could use the postcard as a quick, cheap means of communication. The extract we have on the right-hand side here really talks about how the postcard could be used much as we use text messages to inform somebody that you have arrived somewhere safely or that potentially you were running late. The following year in 1870, a G.R. Humphrey sent this Hungarian postcard to the British Post Office with the annotation correspondence card at the top to show how this card could be used for a British audience. Now, the Post Office wanted to understand how the postcard was being used and wrote to the Director Generals of Post in Vienna. He was able to explain that with the introduction of the postcard, there was actually no detrimental effect on the number of letters being sent. And in fact, in the first 5 months that the postcard was being used, 3.5 million cards were sold. This positive response really led to the Post Office introducing their own card the following year on the 1st of October 1870. It consisted of a pre-printed halfpenny stamp, which at the time was half the price of a letter. Now, these cards were produced by the stamp printers de la Rue, and the text on the front really dictated the rules of these cards, as does the postcard notice, which only the address was to be written on the front of the card. The reverse of the card was in fact then left blank for the sender's message or any printed correspondence from businesses. During the first year, over 75 million cards were actually posted in the United Kingdom. I would imagine the postcard would have been very different for the Victorians in so much as that it was an open form of communication. So anyone in your household or the postal worker delivering your card would be able to read your message. And this led to people coding their messages just to keep that little bit more privacy. Later, when we see the introduction of privately produced postcards where you needed to affix your own stamp, by angling the stamp in different directions, you could also send a secret message to the recipient. This is the language of the stamps here. We have a postcard which denotes what each of them mean. So by affixing the stamp slightly left, right, upside down, you could say extra things such as, I love you, or have you forgotten me? The postcard really was an innovation of its time. It was a quick and cheap means of communication. With the British Post Office's cards changed in design over time, but they were really used as a means of communication. It's not until we start to see privately produced postcards with pictures that the card really starts to evolve and be used in different means. So pictorial postcards were not accepted by the Post Office until 1894, and they had to adhere to quite strict rules. This meant that they left the entire reverse of the postcard blank for the address. So the postcard publishers would leave small sections under the image where the sender could write their message. But as you can see here, this really did reduce the messages to quite a small amount of text. What the Post Office were worried about is that by having extra text on the side of the card where the address would be, this would reduce the space for the address and therefore make it harder to read. This could in turn make it more difficult for sorters to identify it and therefore slow down the process. It's not until 1902 that we start to see the message and the address appear on the same side of the card. These are known as divided back cards, and as you can see, the message appears on the left and the address and the stamp on the right. At this point, one whole side of the card is then left dedicated for the image, and this is really where picture postcards start to kind of really take shape. The height of postcard sending was really from the beginning of the early 1900s through to the First World War. And during this time, in 1 year alone, over 900 million postcards were delivered by the British Post Office. And this was really fueled not only by a want to send cards, but also the craze of starting to collect postcards. Postcard publishers were producing cards in numerous themes, and they were being lapped up by the Edwardian audience. Postcard publishers such as Raphael Tuck's and Sons even held competitions to establish who had collected the most of their cards, with individuals amassing numbers into their thousands. We also see that publishers put serial numbers onto their cards, which again encouraged individuals to collect and really just brought in more revenue for the publishers. Many of the postcards we have within our collection have messages that talk about adding this postcard to your collection, or as you can see on the left-hand side, the individual talking about how many postcards they have in their album. At this stage, the postcard is really being sent for the enjoyment of collecting the image, not so much about expanding on the message and telling the recipient a little bit more about what you're doing or what you might be feeling. The Edwardians, as I was saying, are collected postcards in their thousands, many of which are on the market today. And these cards really now offer you a window into the past, not only through the images that are depicted, but also the correspondence of the sender. Postcards were produced in numerous different themes, whether you're interested in boats or trains, or maybe just learning a little bit more about your local area. Postcards are a great way of collecting this and really learning a little bit more about the past. So as we've seen, the postcard was initially used as a means of communication, but during the Edwardian period, the numbers that were being sent were also fueled by this want to collect the pictures themselves. And really the publishers fueled this by continuing to produce different series and more sets for the individual to amass. During the First World War, soldiers were encouraged to send mail home as a way of boosting morale, and in fact were given free postage. The postcard offers a small message just due to the size of the card alone, but we do have examples within our collection where soldiers have simply written things such as "still going strong" or "okay," just so that they could send something home to their loved ones, just to let them know that they were doing okay. It's that continuous correspondence. Prisoners of war endured isolation during the First World War, and all countries agreed that again they could send postcards home to their countries free of charge. The example that we have here on the left-hand side is a German prisoner of war card sent by rifleman Harry Brown to his mother whilst he was in a concentration camp in Beirut. During the First World War, they were also extremely worried about the leak of information, not only military positioning to the enemy, but those at home really understanding what was really going on the front lines. To mitigate this, the field service postcard was introduced. And as you can see, the card has pre-printed answers from the soldier to select from. This really dictated what the soldier could say and prevented them from adding any more information. You'll see at the top that it actually also specifies that if anything else was written on this card, the censor could destroy it and it would not have made it to its recipient. So photographic cards during this period were really used as a means of propaganda, and they were also a chance of kind of documenting events. Though you will see that at the time they were quite idealized, and they were idealized cards, and they were not true representations of what was happening to the boys at the front. The card in the bottom right-hand corner is actually only one of many that was produced by the Daily Mail during the First World War, here expressing an image of the British soldiers in the German dugout. We also see this use of postcards as propaganda during the women's suffrage movement. These cards were used for and against the women getting the vote, and postcards were a great way of circulating this image through kind of the impactful visual nature of them. Here on the right, we have an example of a kind of a solitary female in prison standing up for her rights, whereas on the left-hand side, we have this image that really demeans the female, making her more of a plaything for the policeman throwing her back and forth. I think it's extremely interesting to see how these cards, which are quite everyday items, could actually express quite a serious and poignant point. As we've seen during the First World War, these postcards did document what was happening with regards to the destruction of kind of the churches that we saw, and they documented events, but they were idealized. The significance of the postcard during this period was more as a means of communication and that continuous correspondence with those at home, just to make sure that people knew that you were safe and well. With the expansion of the Victorian Rail network and later the Holiday Pay Act, more and more people from different classes were able to take holidays to the British coast or day trips to the seaside. And this really led to the increase in demand in seaside postcards. These cards offer a chance to show people at home where you are, or potentially some of the activities that you're taking part in. And we see very quintessential British iconography on here of donkeys, deck chairs, and bandstands. Another traditional type of seaside postcards is the Saucy Side genre. Now, these are very bright, impactful images. They use caricatures to play with body types, and many of the characters are usually put in questionable, innuendo-driven scenarios. Some of the main publishers that produced these type of cards were Bamforth and Company and Donald McGill. Now, Bamforth and Company initially set up as a portrait photographer, but when they saw a market for postcards, moved into that area, ended up producing postcards for much of the 20th century. Due to the questionable morality of this type of card, censorship boards were set up across the country as a way of really dictating what cards were acceptable for the public. Bamforth and Company sent their cards to the Blackpool Censorship Board, and as you can see with the sketch on the left-hand side here, not all of them passed. This one was disapproved in 1958 and has been stamped on the reverse. These censorship boards did also lead to the prosecution of Donald McGill in 1954. He was prosecuted under the 1857 Obscenity Act and was actually charged £50 for some of his designs. However, with the increase in cheaper air travel, more and more people are starting to take holidays to further afield destinations, or perhaps shorter holidays to European countries. Now, it can be slightly harder to send postcards from these types of holidays. You obviously need to know what the word for stamp is in the language where you are, also the ability to find a postbox. So, and then when you are on such longer, go to such longer travel away from the country, sometimes you can return back before the postcard even reaches the recipient. So that, along with technological advances, may have caused the decline of the postcard, with more people turning to sending messages on their phone or images that way. The seaside postcard is a means of kind of telling those at home what a lovely time you're having, continuously talking about the weather, if it's anything like the ones we have in our collection, and also perhaps inciting a little touch of jealousy with the recipient. But I think for many of us, the postcard is so synonymous with the seaside that it's what we tend to associate it with. And if you do go to the British coast now, you can still purchase postcards down the seafront. So I think it has been somewhere where the postcard has been able to survive the best. The postcard can also act as a souvenir of a day trip or an attraction. They're a great, cheap, portable means of taking a memento home with you of an experience. Now, these types of cards will potentially never be sent, but instead they end up adorning a fridge or potentially holding your page in a book. So at this stage, the postcard is more about the image that you're collecting and holding on to, rather than using it for as a communication. Postcards of the exteriors of museums and attractions have been produced from the early 1900s, but it's suggested that the British Museum was one of the first institutions to start issuing postcards of items from their collection. Now, by doing this, they can really dictate what images are circulated, and also it does allow for revenue for the museum. We sell postcards in our shop, which you can purchase as a memento, but also with the post and go machine that we have on site and the telephone box with a pillar box in it, you've got the ability to even send the postcard from your experience of the day. Museums and art galleries also produce postcards of some of the artwork on their walls. Now, many of us are never going to be able to afford a Monet or a Picasso, but the postcard allows a cheaper reproduction of these works for you to take home with you. And again, it's the visual aspect of the postcard that people really want there. So I do think that the postcard can stand alone as not away from a means of communication, and the souvenir is evidence of this. These cards are a token or a memento of an experience, and they're really kept as kept for the pleasure of the individual. Now, we've explored postcards as an artistic production of private postcard publishers. However, they are also being used by contemporary artists today. Now, these postcards are limited edition prints produced by the organisation Art on a Postcard, who raise money for Hepatitis C Trust. Now, because they're at postcard size, they're at a cost which is more accessible to people and a size which is people can accommodate in their homes. Art on a Postcard also hold auctions of original postcard size artwork. And again, it means that these postcards are being used as a collectible item rather than a means of communication. The artist Francesca Calusi-Kramer uses the postcard as her canvas. She embroiders directly into the images, giving new life to these forgotten cards. Here you can see how she adds colour to black and white images, but we also see examples where she adds abstraction to familiar images. It's quite interesting to look at the reverse of the card to see how the embroidery has actually affected the postcard message. So here what she's really done is she's changed the function of the card. The card is no longer a form of communication, but has become a piece of art as art in its own right. Now, Emily May has produced watercolours of postcards within her collection. Here, not only focusing on the pictorial side of the postcard, but also looking at the handwriting, the stamp, and the postal markings on the reverse of the card. Now, these were digitised and turned into a repeat pattern, and working with London-based artist Coco Fennell, crafted into this plunging dress you can see on the right-hand side, which we also have on display in the exhibition. For this show, we thought it would be great to work with a contemporary artist. So we reached out to the London-based artist, Peter Liversidge, and asked if he would produce postcards for the show. Now, these are his text-based postcards he produced that looked really at the process of sending postcards and receiving them. We're really lucky in so much as that we can give these away to our visitors when they come to see the exhibition. And at that point, we really want our visitors to think about how they would use the postcard. Because as we've discussed, postcards can in their own right be a form of artwork. So do you take this home and frame it? People have come to the museum on a day trip. Do you keep it as a memento? Or do you want to use it as its original purpose? Do you want to send this to a loved one or a friend? So we're hoping that at the end of the show, when people have seen the different ways the postcard has been used, when they get this card, they can then start thinking about how they might use it going forward. So what we can see with these artistic postcards is that they're not so much a means of communication, but instead they kind of transcend communication, they become art in their own right. Now, the postcard is having to adapt to a digital age. This is a Twitter account by Tom Jackson called Postcard from the Past. And what he does is take kind of forgotten postcards and give them a new lease of life on social media. And as you can see here, he uses the image of the postcard, but only gives you a very small snippet of the message. So it kind of leaves you that a little bit intrigued to know a bit more. It gives you a small window into what the sender was saying, but kind of makes you think about what else was in that, and what else was in that message. Postcrossing was created in 2005 as a way of connecting people around the world through postcard writing. Now, their website connects people across the globe, and for every postcard that you send, you will receive a postcard in return. I love the fact as well that they also gamify the idea of sending postcards. So on their website, they even have leaderboards for the people that have sent the most cards, or perhaps the person whose cards have traveled the furthest. We can also see in the image above postcards created by your on the website TouchNote. Now, TouchNote claimed to be reinventing personal communication for a digital era. And what their website and app does is it allows you to create your own postcard and incorporate your own images. So there's a greater deal of flexibility than the postcards produced by private publishers. We also see that TouchNote combine the cost of production with that of postage. So it simplifies the process. So you do not even need a pen or a pillar box. You can simply send it from your computer or phone. More companies are also offering the ability to produce your own postcards online and have them printed. And this is leading to people using them for milestones such as wedding invitations, the kind of announcements of the births of children, or thank you cards. These are my personal wedding thank you cards, which I had printed. It was a great way of being able to incorporate images from the wedding, but then I could still hand write the messages. I also think when it's a personal kind of thank you, it's always nicer to hand write something than do anything digital. So at this point, we can really see that the postcard is adapting to its audience and the technology which is available at the time. Not only are postcards being able to be produced online, but organisations like TouchNote are using technology in conjunction with traditional postcard writing as a way of reaching people across the world. I think it's interesting to see that perhaps these postcards aren't being used in the same way they were in 1870, but it's good to still see them continuing to be used. So at this point, I'd like to really just touch on how the postcard has been used during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, these cards were produced by the artist Nathan Huxtable during the first national lockdown. Now, Nathan used Twitter as a way of connecting with people around the world, but he still sent them hand-produced postcards to their homes. They were widely appreciated, with many people retweeting images of the cards with messages of thanks. And I think it's really important to see how the importance of communication during this time and how the postcard could facilitate that. But really, the only way that Nathan was able to reach these people was through social media. So like Postcrossing, it's a great way of seeing the conjunction between technology and traditional postcard writing. We've also seen how postcards were used to bring drama into people's homes. So as theatres were closed, the touring theatre company New Perspectives actually sent a drama out to people's homes through 6 postcard messages. So their piece Love from Cleethorpes, you had to wait at home to get your next instalment to learn that little bit more about what was happening in the story over a 2-month period. We've all probably had to adapt to what we're now classing as the new normal, and postcard design has also done this. These cards are again produced by TouchNote, but they have got examples of lockdown birthdays or staycations where we all sat on the sofa. So I think these kind of postcards, they do show what we're going through at the time. So as we saw with First World War postcards, they document what we're living through. And I think for generations to come, these type of cards, which were produced during the pandemic, will really show what was happening and how people were feeling at the time. So the postcard is a small and cheap means of communication, but I've really found through working on this exhibition and exploring the postcard more, you can really see the significance of them through history and how they've been used. The postcard continues to adapt, and it will adapt for new generations. These cards express the substantial and the mundane of everyday life. We have examples in the collection that talk about the birth of children, losing jobs, or simply the luxury of having a bath that night. The postcard has been with us and adapted to meet our needs. Initially, it was a means of short, quick communication. During the First World War, we see it as a lifeline for those separated during the conflict. And then a more light-hearted side of the postcard as we travel to the coast or visit museums and attractions. Now the postcard can be digital, artistic, or even storytelling. I personally don't know what the future is for the postcard, but I think what it will continue to need to do is adapt to the audience as it goes forward. And I think what we can see here is the postcard has been used in different ways. And if it continues to be broad and has numerous uses, I feel like it is going to survive more for future generations. If you are interested in learning a little bit more about postcards, or you want to see any of these in flesh, the exhibition Wish You Were Here will be on until January 2022. And on our stand, you can even get a flyer for 20% off. So do come and say hello. Also, if you are interested in seeing a little bit more about more of the philatelic side of postcards, we do have a small exhibition on at the moment of George V postcards, which explores the changes in design through his reign, but also some lovely metal items to show you the printing process behind postcards. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if that's quick. Yeah, does anybody have any questions at all about anything they saw or anything like that? I appreciate everyone coming out to listen. I thought I would be talking to two people, so it's lovely. Hi.
So if anybody wants a free post-crossing postcard.
Oh.
If anyone wants a free post-crossing postcard, they can get one from the youth area run by Stamp Factory, directly opposite this auditorium.
Yeah, if you're interested, it's a beautiful design. So they produced a postcard for today, which is World Postcard Day. I was lucky enough to be one of the judges on the panels behind it, and they had hundreds of applicants with kind of different designs. And the theme this year is looking at kind of the postcard across the world. So go have a look at the design and see if you think it does portray that. Yeah. Thanks very much, guys.
Can I just say, Peter Coburn, who's the president of the Royal, has a one frame postcard exhibition over there. It's quite fun, and he is going to be on the youth zone at about midday, so about 30 minutes just to talk through it. So please do pop over there in 30 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Awful stumble in the middle. It's on until the 2nd of January 22.
Okay.
No worries.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, tough for that. That was really good. Thank you.
Good turnout.
Yeah, I was really surprised.
Thank you so much, Constance. Do you want to?
Can we sit down anywhere yet? That was I that did not go as well as I practiced.